Good evening, class. Thank you for joining me on this lovely Sunday night. I've got, as voted on my Twitter, at ProfBloomVTuber, a mix tonight. We had a tie in the poll between poetry reading and our barbershop quartet recording. So we're going to do a bit of both tonight. I am very much looking forward to that. So, to get us going, I thought we would read Book 1 of John Keats's Endymion. So, as a bit of background, John Keats was a romantic poet who was born in the late 1700s and died in 1821, I believe. He was quite young, he was 25, but he left behind a significant body of work that went on to have very large impacts on English poetry going forward from that point. Works you may know are things like Ode on a Grecian Urn, On First Looking into Chapman's Homer, and this, Endymion, which is kind of a retelling of the classic Greek myth of Endymion, only a few characters are kind of combined or renamed. So instead of Selene, in Keats's Endymion, we have Cynthia. More than anything, though, I think this work really speaks to the, capital R romantic nature of the poetry that was very popular at the time. So, sorry, I lost my train of thought for a moment. I'd like to begin by reading the inscription that Keats wrote to Endymion. It was published in 1818, and this inscription was to the memory of Thomas Chatterton, who was another poet. This I don't have on screen. Sorry, I have this in a book right here in my hands. But it does a good job kind of explaining where he was coming from in writing Endymion. Knowing within myself the manner in which this poem has been produced, it is not without a feeling of regret that I make it public. What manner, I mean, will be quite clear to the reader, who must soon perceive great inexperience, immaturity, and every error denoting a feverish attempt rather than a deed accomplished. The two first books, and indeed the two last, I feel sensible are not of such completion as to warrant their passing the press, nor should they if I thought a year's castigation would do them any good. It will not. The foundations are too sandy. It is just that this youngster should die away. A sad thought for me, if I had not some hope that while it is dwindling I may be plotting, and fitting myself for verses fit to live. This may be speaking too presumptuously, and may deserve a punishment, but no feeling man will be forward to inflict it. He will leave me alone, with conviction that there is not a fiercer hell than the failure in a great object. This is not written with the least atom of purpose to forestall criticisms, of course, but from the desire I have to conciliate men who are competent to look, and who do look with a zealous eye, to the honor of English literature. The imagination of a boy is healthy, and the mature imagination of a man is healthy, but there is a space of life between, in which the soul is in a ferment, the character undecided, the way of life uncertain, the ambition thick-sighted. Thence proceeds mawkishness, and all the thousand bitters which those men I speak of must necessarily taste in going over the following pages. I hope I have not been too late a day touched the beautiful mythology of Greece, and dulled its brightness, for I wish to try once more before I bid it farewell. So in that introduction, the preface to his own work, Keats is kind of apologizing and saying, this might be pretty rough, especially if you're a man fully formed an idea. You might find my enthusiasm almost childish. But I want to note that Keats did go ahead and publish it anyway. And today, looking back, we feel a real sense of kind of vivaciousness and life in Keats's poetry that is really, really kind of intoxicating, I think. It's hard to read these lines and not feel moved to some degree. So, without any further ado there, I would like to get going, and we will start with Book 1 of Endymion. I may cut in with notes now and then if there's something that's a bit obtuse. If you don't understand, feel free, ask me questions in the chat, and I can cut in and answer them to the best of my ability. As a quick note, on a structural level, Endymion is written in almost entirely heroic couplets, so rhyming sets of 2 lines in iambic pentameter. This gives it a very strong feeling when you're reading and creates a rhythm that kind of compels itself onward further. So in that sense, Keats was reflecting the classical subject matter with a classical form. But without further ado, Book 1. A thing of beauty is a joy forever. Its loveliness increases. It will never pass into nothingness, but still will keep a bower quiet for us, and a sleep full of sweet dreams, and health, and quiet breathing. Therefore, on every morrow are we wreathing a flowery band to bind us to the earth, spite of despondence, of the inhuman dearth of noble natures, of the gloomy days, of all the unhealthy and o'er-darkened ways made for our searching. Yes, in spite of all, some shape of beauty moves away the pall from our dark spirits, such the sun, the moon, trees old and young, sprouting a shady boon for simple sheep. And such are daffodils with the green world they live in, and clear rills that for themselves a cooling covert make against the hot season. The mid-forest brake, rich with a sprinkling of fair musk-rose blooms, and such too is the grandeur of the dooms we have imagined for the mighty dead. All lovely tales that we have heard or read, an endless fountain of immortal drink, pouring unto us from the heavens' brink. Sorry, just one moment. I want to make sure that we can see... Okay, see the cursor. Nor do we merely feel these essences for one short hour. No, even as the trees that whisper round a temple become soon dear as the temple's self, so does the moon, the passion posy, glories infinite, haunt us till they become a cheering light unto our souls, and bound us to so fast, that, whether there be shine, or gloom o'ercast, they alway must be with us, or we die. Therefore, 'tis with full happiness that I will trace the story of Endymion. The very music of the name has gone into my being, and each pleasant scene is growing fresh before me as the green of our own valleys. So I will begin now, while I cannot hear the city's din, now, while the early budders are just new, and run in mazes of the youngest hue about old forests, while the willow trails its delicate amber, and the dairy pails bring home increase of milk. And as the year grows lush in juicy stalks, I'll smoothly steer my little boat for many quiet hours, with streams that deepen freshly into bowers. Many and many a verse I hope to write, before the daisies, vermeil-rimmed and white, hide in deep herbage, and ere yet the bees hum about in globes of clover and sweet peas. I must be near the middle of my story. Oh, may no wintry season, bare and hoary, see it half finished, but let autumn bold, with universal tinge of sober gold, be all about me when I make an end. And now at once, adventuresome, I send my herald thought into a wilderness. There let its trumpet blow, and quickly dress my uncertain path with green, that I may speed easily onward through flowers and weed. Oh, sorry, cat alert. Come on, buddy, you can't chew on my microphone cord. Come on. All right, cat removal from desk in process. Sorry about that. Continuing on. Upon the sides of Latmos was outspread a mighty forest, for the moist earth fed so plenteously all weed-hidden roots into o'erhanging boughs and precious fruits. And it had gloomy shades, sequestered deep where no man went. And if from shepherd's keep a lamb strayed far adown those inmost glens, never again saw he the happy pens whither his brethren, bleating with content, over the hills at every nightfall went. Among the shepherds 'twas believed ever that not one fleecy lamb which thus did sever from the white flock, but passed unworried by angry wolf, or parred with prying head, until it came to some unfooted plains where the great herds of Pan, his great gains who thus one lamb did lose. Paths there were many, winding through palmy fern and rushes fenny, and ivy banks, all leading pleasantly to a wide lawn, whence one could only see stems thronging all around between the swell of turf and slanting branches. Who could tell the freshness of the space of heaven above, edged round with dark tree-tops, through which a dove would often beat its wings, and often, too, a little cloud would move across the blue. Full in the middle of this pleasantness there stood a marble altar, with a tress of flowers budded newly, and the dew had taken fairy fantasies to strew daisies upon the sacred sward last eve, and so the dawned light in pomp receive. For 'twas the morn. Apollo's upward fire made every eastern cloud a silvery pyre of brightness so unsullied that therein a melancholy spirit well might win oblivion, and melt out his essence fine into the winds. Rain-scented eglantine gave temperate sweets to that well-wooing sun. The lark was lost in him. Cold springs had run to warm their chilliest bubbles in the grass. Man's voice was on the mountains, and the mass of nature's lives and wonders pulsed tenfold to feel this sunrise and its glories old. Now while the silent workings of the dawn were busiest, into that self-same lawn all suddenly, with joyful cries, there sped a troop of little children garlanded, who gathering round the altar seemed to pry earnestly round as wishing to espy some folk of holiday. Nor had they waited for many moments ere their ears were sated with a faint breath of music, which even then filled out its voice and died away again. Within a little space it gave again its airy swellings, with a gentle wave to light-hung leaves in smoothest echoes breaking through copse-clad valleys, ere their death o'ertaking the surgy murmurs of the lonely sea. And now, as deep into the wood as we might mark a lynx's eye, there glimmered light fair faces and a rush of garments white, plainer and plainer showing, till at last into the widest alley they all passed, making directly for the woodland's altar. O kindly Muse, let not my weak tongue falter in telling of this goodly company, of their old piety and of their glee, but let a portion of ethereal dew fall on my head, presently unmew my soul, that I may dare in wayfaring to stammer where old Chaucer used to sing. Leading the way, young damsels danced along, bearing the burden of a shepherd song, each having a white wicker overbrimmed with April's tender younglings. Next, well trimmed, crowd of shepherds with as sunburnt looks as may be read of in Arcadian books, such as sat listening round Apollo's pipe, when the great deity, for earth too ripe, let his divinity o'erflowing die in music, through the vales of Thessaly. Some idly trailed their sheep-hooks on the ground, and some kept up a shrilly mellow sound with ebon-tipped flutes. Close after these, now coming from beneath the forest trees, a venerable priest full soberly, begirt with ministering looks, alway his eye steadfast upon the matted turf he kept. And after him his sacred vestments swept. From his right hand there swung a vase, milk-white, of mingled wine, out-sparkling generous light. And in his left he held a basket full of all sweet herbs that searching eye could cull, wild thyme, and valley lilies whiter still than Leda's love, and cresses from the rill. His aged head, crowned with beechen wreath, seemed like a pole of ivy in the teeth of winter hoar. Then came another crowd of shepherds, lifting in due time aloud their share of the ditty. After them appeared, up-followed by a multitude that reared their voices to the clouds, a fair-wrought car, easily rolling so as scarce to mar the freedom of 3 steeds of dapple brown, who stood therein did seem of great renown among the throng. His youth was fully blown, showing like Ganymede to manhood grown. And for those simple times his garments were a chieftain king's. Beneath his breast, half bare, was hung a silver bugle, and between his nervy knees there lay a boar spear keen. A smile was on his countenance. He seemed to common lookers on, like one who dreamed of idleness in groves Elysian. But there were some who feelingly could scan a lurking trouble in his nether lip, and see that oftentimes the reins would slip through his forgotten hands. Then would they sigh, and think of yellow leaves, of owlet's cry, of logs piled solemnly. Ah, well a day! Why should our young Endymion pine away? Soon the assembly, in a circle ranged, stood silent round the shire. Each look was changed to sudden veneration. Women meek beckoned their sons to silence, while each cheek of virgin bloom paled gently for slight fear. Endymion, too, without a forest peer, stood, wan and pale, and with an odd face, among his brothers of the mountain chase. In midst of all, the venerable priest eyed them with joy from greatest to the least, and after lifting up his aged hands, thus spake he, Men of Latmos, shepherd bands, whose care it is to guard 1,000 flocks, whether descended from beneath the rocks that overtop your mountains, whether come from valleys where the pipe is never dumb, or from your swelling downs where sweet air stirs blue harebells lightly, and where prickly furze buds lavish gold, or ye whose precious charge nibble their fill at ocean's very marge, whose mellow reeds are touched with sounds forlorn by the dim echoes of old Triton's horn, mothers and wives, who day by day prepare the scrip with needments for the mountain air, and all ye gentle girls who foster up udderless lambs, and in a little cup will put choice honey for a favoured youth, yea, every one attend, for in good truth our vows are wanting to our great god Pan. Are not our lowing heifers sleeker than night-swelling mushrooms? Are not our wide plains speckled with countless fleeces? Have not rains greened over April's lap? No howling sad sickens our fearful ewes, and we have had great bounty from Endymion our lord. The earth is glad, the merry lark has poured his early song against yon breezy sky that spreads so clear o'er our solemnity. Thus ending, on the shire he heaped a spire of teeming sweets, enkindling sacred fire. Anon he stained the thick and spongy sod with wine, in honor of the shepherd god. Now while the earth was drinking it, and while bay leaves were crackling in the fragrant pile, and gummy frankincense was sparkling bright neath smothering parsley, and a hazy light spread greyly eastward, thus a chorus sang, O thou, whose mighty palace roof doth hang from jagged trunks, and overshadoweth eternal whispers, glooms, the birth, life, death of unseen flowers in heavy peacefulness, who loves to see the hamadryads dress their ruffled locks where meeting hazels darken, and through whole solemn hours dost sit and hearken the dreary melody of bedded reeds, in desolate places where dank moisture breeds the pipy hemlock to strange overgrowth, bethinking thee how melancholy loth thou wast to lose fair Syrinx, do thou now, by thou love's milky brow, by all the trembling mazes that she ran, hear us, great Pan. O thou, for whose soul-soothing quiet turtles passion their voices cooingly 'mong myrtles, what time thou wanderest at eventide through sunny meadows that outskirt the side of thine enmossed realms, O thou, to whom broad-leaved fig trees even now foredoom their ripened fruitage, yellow-girted bees their golden honeycombs, our village lees their fairest blossomed beans and poppied corn, the chuckling linnet its 5 young unborn to sing for thee, low-creeping strawberries their summer coolness, pent-up butterflies their freckled wings, yea, the fresh budding year all its completions, Be quickly near by every wind that nods the mountain pine, O forester divine. Thou to whom every fawn and satyr flies for willing service, whether to surprise the squatted hare while in half-sleeping fit, or upward ragged precipices flit to save poor lambkins from the eagle's maw, or by mysterious enticement draw bewildered shepherds to their path again, or to tread breathless round the frothy main, and gather up all the fancifullest shells for thee to tumble into naiads' cells, and, being hidden, laugh at their out-peeping, or to delight thee with fantastic leaping, the while they pelt each other on the crown with silvery oak apples and fir cores brown. By all the echoes that about thee ring, hear us, O satyr king! O hearkener to the loud clapping shears, while ever and anon to his shorn peers a ram goes bleating, winder of the horn, when snouted wild boars, routing tender corn, anger our huntsmen, breather round our farms, to keep off mildews and all weather harms, strange ministrant of undescribed sounds that come a-swooning over hollow grounds, and wither drearily on barren moors, dread opener of the mysterious doors leading to universal knowledge, see, great son of Dryope, that many that are come to pay their vows with leaves about their brows. Be still the unimaginable lodge for solitary thinkings, such as dodge conception to the very bourne of heaven, then leave the naked brain. Be still the leaven that spreading in this dull and clodded earth gives it a touch ethereal, a new birth. Be still a symbol of immensity, a firmament reflected in a sea, an element filling the space between and unknown, but no more. We humbly screen with uplift hands our foreheads, lowly bending, and giving out a shout most heaven-rending, conjure thee to receive our humble paean upon thy Mount Lycaean. Even while they brought the burden to a close, a shout from the whole multitude arose that lingered in the air like dying rolls of abrupt thunder, when Ionian shoals of dolphins bobbed their noses through the brine. Meantime, on shady levels, mossy fine, young companies nimbly began dancing to the swift treble pipe and humming string. Aye, those fair living forms swam heavenly to tunes forgotten, out of memory. Fair creatures, whose young children's children bred Thermopylae its heroes, not yet dead, but in old marbles ever beautiful. High genitors, unconscious did they cull time's sweet first fruits. They danced to weariness, and then in quiet circles did they press the hillock turf, and caught the latter end of some strange history, potent to send a young mind from its bodily tenement. Or they might watch the quoit pitchers, intent on either side, pitying the sad death of Hyacinthus, when the cruel breath of Zephyr slew him. Zephyr penitent, who now, ere Phoebus mounts the firmament, fondles the flower amid the sobbing rain. The archers, too, upon a wider plain, beside the feathery whizzing of the shaft, and the dull twanging bowstring, and the raft branched down sweeping from a tall ash-top, called up 1,000 thoughts to envelop those who would watch. Perhaps the trembling knee and frantic gape of lonely Niobe, poor lonely Niobe, when her lovely young were dead and gone, and her caressing tongue lay a lost thing upon her paly lip, and very, very deadliness did nip her motherly cheeks. Aroused from this sad mood by one, who at a distance loud hallooed, uplifting his strong bow into the air, many might after brighter visions stare, after the Argonauts, in blind amaze, tossing about on Neptune's restless ways, until from the horizon's vaulted side there shot a golden splendor far and wide, sprangling those million poutings of the brine with quivering oar. Was even an awful shine from the exaltation of Apollo's bow, a heavenly beacon in their dreary woe, who thus were ripe for high contemplating, might turn their steps towards the sober ring where sat Endymion and the aged priest, among shepherds gone in eld, whose looks increased the silvery setting of their mortal star. There they discoursed upon the fragile bar that keeps us from our homes ethereal, and what our duties there, nightly call vesper, the beauty crest of summer weather, to summon all the downiest clouds together, excuse me, to summon all the downiest clouds together for the sun's purple couch, to emulate in ministering the potent rule of fate with speed of fire-tailed exaltations, to tint her pallid cheek with bloom, who cons sweet poesy by moonlight. Besides these, a world of other unguessed offices. Anon they wandered, by divine converse, into Elysium, vying to rehearse each one his own anticipated bliss. One felt heart certain that he could not miss his quick-gone love among fair blossom boughs, where every zephyr sigh pouts and endows her lips with music for the welcoming. Another wished, mid that eternal spring, to meet his rosy child, with feathery sails, sweeping eye earnestly through almond vales, who, suddenly, should stoop through the smooth wind, and with the balmiest leaves his temples bind, and ever after through those regions be his messenger, his little Mercury. Some were athirst in soul to see again their fellow huntsmen o'er the wide champaign in times long past, to sit with them and talk of all the chances in their earthly walk, comparing joyfully their plenteous stores of happiness to when upon the moors benighted close they huddled from the cold and shared their famished scrips. Thus all out told their fond imaginations, saving him whose eyelids curtained up their jewels dim, Endymion. Yet hourly had he striven to hide the cankering venom that had riven his fainting recollections. Now indeed his senses had swooned off. He did not heed the sudden silence, or the whispers low, or the old eyes dissolving at his woe, or anxious calls, or close of trembling palms, or maiden's sigh that grief itself embalms. But in the self-same fixed trance he kept, like one who on the earth had never stepped. Aye, even as dead still as a marble man, frozen in that old tale, Arabian. Hydration check. All right, continuing on. Who whispers him so pantingly and close? Fiona, his sweet sister, of all those, his friends the dearest. Hushing signs she made, and breathed a sister's sorrow to persuade a yielding up, a cradling on her care. Her eloquence did breathe away the curse. She led him, like some midnight spirit nurse of happy changes and emphatic dreams, along a path between two little streams, guarding his forehead with her round elbow from low-grown branches, and his footsteps slow from stumbling over stumps and hillocks small, until they came to where these streamlets fall, with mingled bubblings and a gentle rush, into a river, clear, brimful, and flush with crystal mocking of the trees and sky. A little shallop, floating there hard by, pointed its beak over the fringed bank, and soon it lightly dipped, and rose, and sank, and dipped again, with the young couple's weight, Fiona guiding through the water straight towards a bowery island opposite, which gaining presently, she steered light into a shady, fresh, and ripply cove, where nested was an arbor overwove by many a summer's silent fingering, to whose cool bosom she was used to bring her playmates with their needle broidery and minstrel memories of times gone by. So she was gently glad to see him laid under her favorite bower's quiet shade, on her own couch, new made of flower leaves, dried carefully on the cooler side of sheaves, when last the sun his autumn tresses shook, and the tanned harvester's rich armfuls took. Soon was he quieted to slumberous rest, but ere it crept upon him, he had pressed Fiona's busy hand against his lips, and still asleeping, held her fingertips in tender pressure. And as a willow keeps a patient watch over the stream that creeps windingly by it, so the quiet maid held her in peace, so that a whispering blade of grass, a wailful gnat, a bee bustling down in the bluebells, or a wren light rustling among sere leaves and twigs might all be heard. O magic sleep! O comfortable bird that broodest o'er the troubled sea of the mind till it's hushed and smoothed! O unconfined restraint, imprisoned liberty! great key to golden palaces, strange minstrelsy, fountains grotesque, new trees, bespangled caves, echoing grottos, full of tumbling waves and moonlight, aye, to all the mazy world of silvery enchantment, who, upfurled beneath thy drowsy wing a triple hour, but renovates and lives? Thus, in the bower, Endymion was calmed to life again. Opening his eyelids with a healthier brain, he said, I feel this thine endearing love all through my bosom. Thou art as a dove trembling its closed eyes and sleeked wings about me, and the pearliest dew not brings such morning incense from the fields of May, as do those brighter drops that twinkling stray from those kind eyes, the very home and haunt of sisterly affection. Can I want aught else, aught nearer heaven than such tears? Yet dry them up, in bidding hence all fears that, any longer, I will pass my days alone and sad. No, I will once more raise my voice upon the mountain heights, once more make my horn parlay from their foreheads hoar. Again my trooping hounds their tongues shall loll around the breathed boar. Again I'll pull the fair-grown yew-tree for a chosen bow. And when the pleasant sun is getting low, again I'll linger in a sloping mead to hear the speckled thrushes, and see feed our idle sheep. So be thou cheered, sweet, and if thy lute is here, softly entreat my soul to keep in its resolved course. Hereat Peona, in their silver source, shut her pure sorrow drops with glad exclaim, and took a lute from which there pulsing came a lively prelude, fashioning the way in which her voice should wander. 'Twas a lay more subtle cadence, more forest wild than Dryope's lone lulling of her child. And nothing since has floated in the air so mournful strange. Surely some influence rare went, spiritual, through the damsel's hand, for still with Delphic emphasis she spanned the quick invisible strings, even though she saw Endymion's spirit melt away and thaw before the deep intoxication. But soon she came, with sudden burst upon her self-possession, swung the lute aside, and earnestly said, Brother, 'tis vain to hide that thou dost know of such things mysterious, immortal, starry. Such alone could thus weigh down thy nature. Hast thou sinned in aught offensive to the heavenly powers? Aught a Paphian dove upon a message sent? Thy deathful bow against some deer-herd bent, sacred to Dian? Haply thou hast seen her naked limbs among the alders green, and that, alas, is death. No, I can trace something more high perplexing in thy face. Endymion looked at her, and pressed her hand, and said, Art thou so pale, who wast so bland and merry in our meadows? How is this? Tell me thine ailment, tell me all amiss. Ah, thou hast been unhappy at the change wrought suddenly in me. What indeed more strange? Or more complete to overwhelm surmise? Ambition is no sluggard, is no prize that toiling years would put within my grasp that I have sighed for, with so deadly gasp no man ever panted for a mortal love. So all have set my heavier grief above these things which happen, rightly have they done. I, who still saw the horizontal sun heave his broad shoulder o'er the edge of the world, outfacing Lucifer, and then had hurled my spear aloft as signal for the chase, I, who for very sport of heart would race with my own steed from Araby, pluck down a vulture from his towery perching, frown a lion into growling, loath retire, but lose at once all my toil breeding fire, and sink thus low? But I will ease my breast of secret grief here in this bowery nest. This river does not see the naked sky till it begins to progress silverly around the western border of the wood, whence from a certain spot its winding flood seems at the distance like a crescent moon, and in that look the very pride of June, had I been used to pass my weary eves, the rather for the sun unwilling leaves so dear a picture of his sovereign power, and I could witness his most kingly hour, when he doth lighten up the golden reins, and paces leisurely down amber plains his snorting four. Now, when the chariot last its beams against the zodiac lion cast, there blossomed suddenly a magic bed of sacred dittamy, and poppies red, at which I wondered greatly, knowing well that but one night had wrought this flowery spell, and, sitting down close by, began to muse what it might mean. Perhaps, thought I, Morpheus, in passing here, his owlet pinions shook. Or it may be, ere matron night uptook her ebon urn, young Mercury by stealth had dipped his rod in it. Such garland wealth came not by common growth. Thus on I thought, until my head was dizzy and distraught. Moreover, through the dancing poppies stole a breeze, most softly lulling to my soul, and shaping visions all about my sight of colours, wings, and bursts of spangly light, which became more strange and dim, and then were gulfed in a tumultuous swim, and then I fell asleep. Ah, can I tell the enchantment that afterwards befell? Yet it was but a dream, yet such a dream that never tongue, although it overteem with mellow utterance, like a cavern spring, could figure out and to conception bring all I beheld and felt. Methought I lay watching the zenith, where the Milky Way among the stars in virgin splendor pours, and travelling my eye until the doors of heaven appeared to open for my flight. I became loath and fearful to alight from such high soaring by a downward glance, so kept me steadfast in that airy trance, spreading imaginary pinions wide, when presently the stars began to glide and faint away before my eager view, at which I sighed that I could not pursue, and dropped my vision to the horizon's verge, and lo! From opening clouds I saw emerge the loveliest moon that ever silvered o'er a shell for Neptune's goblet. She did soar so passionately bright, my dazzled soul commingling with her argent spheres did roll through clear and cloudy, even when she went at last into a dark and vapory tent, whereat, methought, the lidless-eyed train of planets all were in the blue again. To commune with those orbs, once more I raised my sight right upward, but it was quite dazed by a bright something sailing down apace, making me quickly veil my eyes and face. Again I looked, and O ye deities, who from Olympus watch our destinies! Whence that completed form of all completeness? Whence came that high perfection of all sweetness? Speak, stubborn earth, and tell me where, oh, where hast thou a symbol of her golden hair? Not oat sheaves drooping in the western sun, not thy soft hand, fair sister, let me shun such follying before thee. Yet she had, indeed, locks bright enough to make me mad, and they were simply Gordianed up and braided, leaving in naked comeliness unshaded her pearl-round ears, white neck, and orbed brow, the which were blended in I know not how, with such a paradise of lips and eyes, blush-tinted cheeks, half-smiles and faintest sighs, that, when I think thereon, my spirit clings and plays about its fancy, till the stings of human neighborhood envenom all. Unto what awful power shall I call? To what high fane? Ah, see her hovering feet, more bluely veined, more soft, more whitely sweet than those of sea-born Venus, when she rose from out her cradle shell. The wind outblows her scarf into a fluttering pavilion. 'Tis blue and overspangled with a million of little eyes, as though thou wert to shed over the darkest, lushest bluebell bed handfuls of daisies. Endymion, how strange! Dream within dream! She took an airy range, and then towards me, like a very maid, came blushing, waning, willing, and afraid, and pressed me by the hand. Ah! Was too much. Methought I fainted at the charmed touch, yet held my recollection, even as one who dives 3 fathoms where the waters run gurgling in beds of coral. For anon I felt up-mounted in that region where falling stars dart their artillery forth, and eagles struggle with the buffeting north that balances the heavy meteor stone. Felt, too, I was not fearful nor alone, but lapped and lulled among the dangerous sky. Soon, as it seemed, we left our journeying high, and straightway into frightful eddies swooped, such as a muster where grey time has scooped huge dens and caverns in a mountain's side. There hollow sounds aroused me, and I sighed to faint once more by looking on my bliss. I was distracted. Madly did I kiss the wooing arms which held me, and did give my eyes at once to death. But 'twas to live, take in draughts of life from the gold fount of kind and passionate looks, to count and count these moments, by some greedy help that seemed a second self, that each might be redeemed and plundered of its load of blessedness. Ah, desperate mortal, I even dared to press her very cheek against my crowned lip, and at that moment felt my body dip into a warmer air. A moment more, our feet were soft in flowers. There was store of newest joys upon that alp. Sometimes a scent of violets and blossoming limes loitered around us, then of honey cells made delicate from all white flower bells, and once, above the edges of our nest, an arch-faced peeped, an oread, as I guessed. Why did I dream that sleep o'erpowered me in midst of all this heaven? Why not see, far off, the shadows of his pinions dark and stare them from me? But no, like a spark that needs must die, although its little beam reflects upon a diamond, my sweet dream fell into nothing, into stupid sleep. And so it was until a gentle creep, a careful moving, caught my waking ears, and up I started. Ah, my sighs, my tears, my clenched hands, for lo, the poppies hung dew-dabbled on their stalks, the ousel sung a heavy ditty, and the sullen day had children herald Hesperus away with leaden looks. The solitary breeze blustered and slept, and its wild self did tease with wayward melancholy. And I thought, mark me, Peona, that sometimes it brought faint fare-thee-wells, and sigh-shrilled adieus. Away I wandered. All the pleasant hues of heaven and earth had faded. Deepest shades were deepest dungeon. Heaths and sunny shade, excuse me. Heaths and sunny glades were full of pestilent light. Our taintless rills seemed sooty, and o'erspread with upturned gills of dying fish. The male rose had blown in frightful scarlet, and its thorns outgrown like spiked aloe. If an innocent bird before my heedless footsteps stirred, and stirred in little journeys, I beheld it in a disguised demon, missioned to knit my soul with under darkness, to entice my stumblings down some monstrous precipice. Therefore I eager followed, and did curse the disappointment. Time, that aged nurse, rocked me to patience. Now, thank gentle heaven, these things, with all their comfortings, are given to my down-sunken hours, and with thee, sweet sister, help to stem the ebbing sea of weary life. Hydration, cat removal. Sorry about that. Just a moment. Thus ended he, and both sat silent. The maid was very loath to answer, feeling well that breathed words would all be lost, unheard, as vain as swords against the enchased crocodile, or leaps of grasshoppers against the sun. She weeps and wonders, struggles to devise some blame, put on such a look as would say, shame on this poor weakness. But, for all her strife, she could as soon have crushed away the life from a sick dove. At length, to break the pause, she said with trembling chance, "Is this the cause? This all? Yet it is strange and sad, alas, that one who through this middle earth should pass most like a sojourning demigod, and leave his name upon the harp-string, should achieve no higher bard than simple maidenhood, singing alone and fearfully. How the blood left his young cheek, and how he used to stray he knew not where, and how he would say, Nay, if any 'twas love, yet 'twas love, what could it be but love? How a ring-dove let fall a sprig of yew-tree in his path, and how he died. And then that love doth scathe the gentle heart, as northern blasts do roses. And then the ballad of his sad life closes with sighs and an alas. Endymion, be rather in the trumpet's mouth anon, among the winds at large, that all may hearken. Although before the crystal heavens darken, I watch and dote upon the silver lakes pictured in western cloudiness, that takes the semblance of gold rocks and bright gold sands, islands and creeks and amber-fretted strands with horses prancing o'er them, palaces and towers of amethyst. Would I so tease my pleasant days because I could not mount into those regions? The Morphean fount of that fine element that visions, dreams, and fitful whims of sleep are made of, streams into its airy channels with so subtle, so thin a breathing, not the spider's shuttle, circled 1,000,000 times within the space of a swallow's nest door, could delay a trace a tinting of its quality? How light must dreams themselves be, seeing they're more slight than the mere nothing that engenders them? Then wherefore sully the entrusted gem of high and noble life with thoughts so sick? Why pierce high-fronted honor to the quick for nothing but a dream? Hereat the youth looked up. A conflicting of shame and ruth was in his plated brow, yet his eyelids widened a little, as when zephyr bids a little breeze to creep between the fans of careless butterflies. Amid his pains he seemed to taste a drop of manna dew, full palatable, and a colour grew upon his cheek. While thus he lifeful spake, Fiona, ever have I longed to slake my thirst for the world's praises. Nothing base, no meerling slumberous phantasm could unlace the stubborn Kansas for my voyage prepared, though now 'tis tattered, leaving my bark barred and sullenly drifting. Yet my higher hope is oft too wide, too rainbow large a scope to fret at myriads of earthly wrecks. Wherein lies happiness? In that which becks our ready minds to fellowship divine, a fellowship with essence till we shine, full alchemized and free of space. Behold the clear religion of heaven. Hold a rose leaf round thy fingers' taperness, and soothe thy lips, hissed, when the airy stress of music's kiss impregnates the free winds, and with a sympathetic touch unbinds Aeolian magic from their lucid wombs. Then old songs waken from enclouded tombs. Old ditties sigh above their father's grave. Ghosts of melodious prophesyings rave round every spot where trod Apollo's foot. Bronze clarions awake, and faintly bruit where long ago a giant battle was, and from the turf a lullaby doth pass in every place where infant Orpheus slept. Feel we these things? That moment we have stepped into a sort of oneness, and our state is like a floating spirit's. But there are richer entanglements, enthrallments far more self-destroying, leading by degrees to the chief intensity. The crown of these is made of love and friendship, and sits high upon the forehead of humanity. All its more ponderous and bulky worth is friendship, whence there ever issues forth a steady splendor, but at the tip-top there hangs by unseen film an orbed drop of light, and that is love. Its influence thrown in our eyes genders a novel sense at which we start and fret, till in the end, melting into its radiance, we blend, mingle, and so become a part of it. Nor with aught else can our souls interknit so wingedly. When we combine therewith, life's self is nourished by its proper pith, and we are nurtured like a pelican brood. Aye, so delicious is the unsating food that men, who might have towered in the van of all the congregated world to fan and winnow from the coming step of time all chaff of custom, wipe away all slime left by men-slugs and human serpentry, have been content to let occasion die whilst they did sleep in love's Elysium. And, truly, I would rather be struck dumb than speak against this ardent listlessness, for I have ever thought that it might bless the world with benefits unknowingly, as does the nightingale, up-perched high and cloistered among cool and bunched leaves. She sings but to her love, nor e'er conceives how tiptoe night holds back her dark grey hood. Just so may love, although 'tis understood the mere commingling of passionate breath produce more than our searching witnesseth. What I know not, but who of men can tell that flowers would bloom, or that green fruit would swell to melting pulp, that fish would have bright mail, the earth its dower of river, wood, and vale, the meadows runnel pebble stones, the seed its harvest, or the lute its tones, tones ravishment, or ravishment its sweet, if human souls did never kiss and greet. Now, if this earthly love has power to make men's being mortal, immortal, to shake ambition from their memories, and brim their measure of content, what merest whim seems all this poor endeavour after fame to one who keeps within his steadfast aim a love immortal, and immortal too? Look not so wildered, for these things are true, and never can be born of atomies that buzz about our slumbers like brain flies, leaving us fancy sick. No, no, I'm sure my restless spirit never could endure to brood so long upon one luxury, unless it did, though fearfully, espy a hope beyond the shadow of a dream. My sayings will the less obscured seem when I have told thee how my waking sight has made me scruple whether that same night was passed in dreaming. Hearken, sweet Peona, beyond the matron temple of Latona, which we should see but for these darkening boughs, lies a deep hollow, from whose ragged brows bushes and trees do lean all around athwart, and meet so nearly that with wings outwrought and spreaded tail, a vulture could not glide past them, but he must brush on every side. Some mouldered steps lead into this cool cell, far as the slabbed margin of a well, whose patient level peeps its crystal eye right upward, through the bushes, to the sky. Oft have I brought thee flowers, on their stalks set like vestal primroses, but dark velvet edges them round, and they have golden pits. 'Twas there I got them, from the gaps and slits in a mossy stone that sometimes was my seat, when all above was faint with midday heat. And there in strife no burning thoughts to heed, I'd bubble up the water through a reed. So reaching back to boyhood, make me ships of molted feathers, touchwood, alder chips with leaves stuck in them, and the Neptune be of their petty ocean. Oftener, heavily, when lovelorn hours had left me less a child, I sat contemplating the figures wild of o'erhead clouds melting the mirror through. Upon a day, while thus I watched, by flew a cloudy Cupid with his bow and quiver, so plainly charactered no breeze would shiver the happy chance. So happy, I was fain to follow it upon the open plain, and therefore was just going, when behold, a wonder fair as any I have told, the same bright face I tasted in my sleep, smiling in the clear well. My heart did leap through the cool depth. It moved as if to flee. I started up when, lo, refreshfully there came upon my face in plenteous showers dewdrops, and dewy buds, and leaves, and flowers, wrapping all objects from my smothered sight, bathing my spirit in a new delight. Aye, such a breathless honey feel of bliss alone preserved me from the drear abyss of death, for the fair form had gone again. Pleasure is oft a visitant, but pain clings cruelly to us, like the gnawing sloth of the deer's tender haunches, late and loath. 'Tis scared away by slow returning pleasure. How sickening, how dark the dreadful leisure of weary days, made deeper exquisite by a foreknowledge of unslumberous night. Like sorrow came upon me, heavier still than when I wandered from the poppy hill, and a whole age of lingering moments crept sluggishly by, ere more contentment swept away at once the deadly yellow spleen. Yes, thrice have I this fair enchantment seen, once more been tortured with renewed life, when last the wintry gusts gave over strife with the conquering sun of spring, and left the skies warm and serene, but yet with moistened eyes in pity of the shattered infant buds. That time thou didst adorn with amber studs my hunting cap, as I laughed and smiled, chatted with thee, and many days exiled all torment from my breast. 'Twas even then straying about, yet cooped up in the den of helpless discontent, hurling my lance from place to place, and following it chance. At last, by hap, through some young trees it struck, and, plashing amongst bedded pebbles, stuck in the middle of a brook, whose silver ramble down 20 little falls, through reeds and brambles tracing along, it brought me to a cave, whence it ran brightly forth, and white did lave the nether sides of mossy stones and rock, among which it gurgled blithe adieus, to mock its own sweet grief at parting. Overhead hung a lush screen of drooping weeds, and spread thick as to curtain up some wood nymph's home. "Ah, impious mortal, whither do I roam?" said I low-voiced. "Ah, whither? 'Tis the grot of Prosperine, when hell, obscure and hot, doth her resign, and where her tender hands she dabbles on the cool and sluicy sands. Or 'tis the cell of Echo, where she sits and babbles through silence, till her wits are gone in tender madness, and anon faints into sleep with many a dying tone of sadness. Oh, that she would take my vows, and breathe them sighingly among the boughs, sue her gentle ears, for whose fair head daily I pluck sweet flowerets from their bed, and weave them dyingly. Send honey whispers round every leaf, that all those gentle lispers may sigh my love unto her pitying. O charitable Echo, hear and sing this ditty to her, Tell her. So I stayed my foolish tongue, and listening half afraid, stood stupefied with my own empty folly, and blushing for the freaks of melancholy. Salt tears were coming, when I heard my name most fondly lipped, and then these accents came. Endymion, the cave is secreter than the isle of Delos. Echo hence shall stir no sighs, but sigh warm kisses, or light noise of thy combing hand, the while its travelling cloys and trembles through my labyrinthine hair. At that oppressed I hurried in. Ah, where are those swift moments? Whither are they fled? I'll smile no more, Peona, nor will wed sorrow the way to death, but patiently bear up against it. So farewell, sad sigh, and come instead demurest meditation to occupy me wholly, and to fashion my pilgrimage for the world's dusky brink. No more will I count over, link by link, my chain of grief. No longer strive to find a half-forgetfulness in mountain wind blustering about my ears. Ay, thou shalt see, dearest of sisters, what my life shall be, what a calm round of hours shall make my days. There is a palely flame of hope that plays where'er I look, but yet I'll say 'tis naught, and here I bid it die. Have not I caught already a more healthy countenance? By this the sun is setting. We may chance meet some of our near dwellers with my car. This said, he rose, faint smelling like a star through autumn mists, and took Peona's hand. They stepped into the boat and launched from land. So that was book one of Keats's Endymion. It gets a bit wordy from time to time, I will say. But the language itself is so lush and lovely, especially in all of Keats's natural descriptions. You know, these gorgeous meadows, rills. A rill is a small stream. Meadows, rills, flowers growing faster than can be possible, and this commingling of gods and people in the same place. You know, he's having encounters now with Echo. He's met some woman that he can't get out of his mind. And his sister's like, is that real, brother? You know, aren't you just going mad, dreaming? And he's like, no, I promise. Let me explain it to you. In book two, they go and pursue it more directly, and we meet more characters. But I thought it would be lovely to just read the first book. I hope it was enjoyable to listen to. I know I had a few little flubs in there and a few instances of having to remove my cat from my desk, who also was enjoying the poetry. I am going to quickly end this stream and begin another one for the Barbershop Quartets, just so that I don't have to split the VODs in half later. So I will get some more water and rejoin you in about 5 minutes, class. Thank you very much, and I'll see you soon.